Okay, boys, welcome again. Hope you had a nice break. Where's Martin? How are you?
Who knows what's this break business? What's break? I don't know what a break is. I've got no idea what a break is.
Oh,
Although,
between our
uh,
last meeting together when
uh,
we did the 1984 singles.
oh yeah, okay, you might call that a break, but
Yeah.
this has been. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you, and there's no break in between.
Cool.
We always catch up from where we left off.
Nice.
G'day,
Beautiful.
Leo. G'day,
Um,
Leo. G'day, Wes.
Hey, howdy.
No smart aleck comments from me.
Oh, you decided to keep quiet.
Well, today, as you know, we're going to do our 1984 albums. And as predicted, I found it a tough task. I suspect you did as well, Martin.
Hey, look, yeah, I was pretty gobsmacked when I actually looked at the list of 84 singles. So many great songs, but albums, yeah, really scratching it. Tricky.
What about
I,
you?
I, wa-
Yeah.
I will say one thing. 1984 was the year that I actually started writing record reviews for publication. And there was a magazine I used to subscribe to, kind of a religious lifestyle magazine called On Being. And I got a bit tired of record reviews that I didn't think were very good. So I wrote one and sent it in saying, hey, look, how's this? And to my great surprise, they wrote back to me with a check.
You got
And
paid for doing record reviews?
yeah, hey, it's not a living, let me tell you that much. No, you could buy a milkshake or an ice cream, and that's about it. But this was the start of many years of me writing articles and reviews of records, and proved quite portentous for years to come for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. How did you find this process, Wes? The albums?
Uh, for me, I've just found it really hard to choose because I think this was an exceptional period in music, and I'm looking here primarily at contemporary pop music because there was so much material in there which one could easily say, yeah, that's eligible for being part of the top five. And but to the side of this, there's also jazz music and there's also classical music, and that it was a significant period because this is just before CDs start to hit, and as a result of that, we're getting some of the most fantastic tunes on the lousiest vinyl. Because like there was some record companies and one that often puts stuff out on a gold looking label with black writing. For example, you might know who I'm referring to. And it just had the flimsiest of material and the cheapest looking vinyl that has ever been put out. Thank goodness that there's now a standard and you can get the material that you want, and it sounds magnificent now.
More on that a bit later, Wes. I've got a little mini rant. But yeah, you're so right. Exactly right. No, notice something for myself that I didn't actually purchase any 1984 albums in 1984. Which I found quite interesting, and that's what I thought about the music scene at the time. But I've since purchased over the years, and my any stories that I have to relate to you will be down the track stories and going back to 1984. So
hmm
that gives you an indication of how my top five is going to be slanted. All right, well, shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
Great, Martin, number five.
Sure. Now, what I said before, I do acknowledge that there were some absolutely pivotal albums in 1984, but as far as albums that have lasting emotional resonance, not so many. So my number five is U2's The Unforgettable Fire,
Great album.
which in many respects was a transitional album. So their first three albums were very raw. And Bono often talks about how influenced by the Sex Pistols and the Ramones they were. And they didn't really sound like those bands in the earliest albums, but they had this visceral, raw energy to them. And the Unforgettable Fire was when they made a very distinct break and started working with well-known ambient artist and producer Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois. And to my mind, they kind of transitioned from a rock band into a pop group at this point, where less emphasis on the rhythm section driving everything and more on arrangements and structure and crafted tunes, perhaps. I don't know if The Unforgettable Fire was their strongest album. I guess you would call it magisterial Joshua Tree was still to come. The single Pride in the Name of Love, not my favorite, perhaps, but Bad, fantastic song. The Sort of Homecoming was great. And my favorite song, one of their more obscure ones from U2, was Promenade. Worth a listen if you want to dig into it. So, yeah, about half and half for this record, but those songs still have meaning for me. U2, The Unforgettable Fire.
Right.
What about MLK and the title track?
Yeah, okay. Look, War was the album that really resonated with me, start to finish. And the band that I was in, I used to play this record to them all the time. And I remember the drummer was like, "What's this garbage?" You know, like when we're doing sound checks or setting up, "What's this garbage? Why are we listening to this?" And then within a year or two, we were covering New Year's Day and songs like that. And they kind of escalated out of the underground and into the mainstream. And The Unforgettable Fire to me was them really stepping into the mainstream with intent and saying, we're not just for rock nerds, we're for everybody. And, time has proven how potent a band they did become. Yeah.
Cool. Wes, what about your number 5?
In the 1970s, I really loved Joe Cocker. I loved the Mad Dogs and Englishmen, and I loved his Beatle covers. I loved The Letter. She came in through the bathroom window, and of course, with a little help from my friends. And then by the time the late 70s happened, sort of Joe had disappeared from the scene until 1983, 84, that sort of era. Sheffield Shield and this album, which comes in at number 5, is Civilized Man. It certainly may not be his greatest album, but it got me into liking his music again, and marked the start of him having great music and hit albums again as well. On the project Civilized Man, there's no hits, but there's some excellent covers of Squeeze's Tempted, the Drifters tune There Goes My Baby, and of course the title track. They're all highlights. Maybe Hold On, I Feel Our Love Is Changing is also great. But it's a stellar bunch of musos, several from Toto. Then there's Randy Brecker, Sissy Houston. Just a stunning album.
Well,
Excellent. Boys, I'm going to give a props to Midnight Oil. Comes in at number 5 with Red Sails in the Sunset. I suspect we may hear a bit more of them later on. I'm not sure about you blokes. But this is their 5th studio album, released in October of 84. And of course, it got to number 1 here in Australia, and released a couple of singles from that, When Generals Talk and Best of Both Worlds. I wouldn't have had this in my top 5 unless I came back to it recently, and it actually began to resonate. I should say, past tense. I wasn't a big Midnight Oil fan. I wasn't too enamored with their 1098 stuff that they had. However, I purchased the box set of their albums and decided to dig deep. And this album really came across to me as being a beauty. And one of the reasons is it's very sparse production. And I'm into that sort of stuff. If they've got a message, which they do have, it actually comes out loud and clear. They really just have the bass and drums as your basis, and they have the instruments coming in and out throughout the album. And that's what I like that stuff. And I was happy to be able to join in with Garrett, whether you hate or love Peter Garrett's voice. The message rings loud and clear, and that's what got me enjoying this album when I recently put it on again and listened to it. My number 5, Red Sails in the Sunset by Midnight Oil.
I think the drummer has also done a few songs on that album too. I think it's the only album that he did some songs, but I could be wrong on that. But certainly 2 songs were featuring the drummer.
Rob Hurst.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of it dawned on me relatively late in the game that I always thought of Midnight Oil as Peter Garrett's band, but it was probably more Rob Hurst's band and more Rob Hurst driving the direction. And I'm not saying Peter Garrett didn't have a lot of say either, let alone the incredible input of the other guys. Yeah, good one, Leo.
Yeah. All right, Martin, you're number 4.
Well, my number 4 is the record that got me started with my music career, somewhat inadvertently, because I was basically complaining about other writers. It's a band from the Christian marketplace called Daniel Amos. Now, they weren't writing Oh Happy Day or Put Your Hand in the Hand, happy clappy kind of songs. They're a bit more Midnight Oilish, a little bit split ends with the early split ends with the satire and the zaniness, a little bit Talking Heads with the post-punk, new wave-ish, angular sort of thing. And their album Vox Humana was actually the 3rd in a sequence of 4 albums that were following thematically ideas of what do people of faith do in a world that is starving, and what do people of faith have to say or do about the environment, excess, asking deep questions, and not only that, but referring to literature like William Blake, Dostoevsky, people like that. So they put out an album called Alama and then Doppelganger, and this is the 3rd of a 4-part series. And the 4th one, Fearful Symmetry. This was their synth-based album, more Depeche Mode influenced. They had songs like It's the 80s, Where's Our Rocket Packs, and Sanctuary, and intriguing, thought-provoking, and artistic. Loved it.
Wow, good choice. Yeah, they kicked on, didn't they? And released a number of albums over the years.
The main guy behind it, Terry Scott Taylor, just put out an album last year, in fact, which some have called his magnum opus. I haven't actually given it a deep listen.
Okay.
But I've got to thank that guy for introducing me to all kinds of classic literature and great poets, Jared Manley Hopkins, Czesław Milosz, not the most obvious thing when you go into a religious bookstore, but hey, open my mind and open my imagination. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Okay, where's your number 4?
Well, you took a sideways move there, didn't you, Mark? So I'm going to take a sideways move as well. And this is to an artist maybe you've never even heard of. It's a girl called Blossom Dearie, and the album's called A Tuberous. For those who are not familiar, she was a singer, songwriter, pianist who blurred the line between jazz and cabaret. She had this really wispy little girl type voice. However, she sang with people like Benny Goodman's band, the Blue Flames, which was a group within the Woody Herman band. And she's best known for songs like the Pro Musica Antiqua, which anyone who has a slight interest in classical music is just going to laugh themselves on the floor listening to that. That's all I'm going to say. Then there's the song Hey John, and another hilarious piece called Someone's Been Sending Me Flowers, which was one of the highlights of this album. All three songs are really witty, and if you would like a copy of the album, Amazon is currently selling new vinyl copies of this for over $1,000 US.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a live album recorded at the Ballroom at the New York City in 1984 and Rush released. Here it was put out on Warren Fahey's Larrikin label, and there's songs from Spike Milligan, Johnny Mercer, Cy Coleman, and of course, Blossom Dearie.
Wow. Nice one. Nice one, Wes. You've got us there, that's for sure. You got me.
Well, have a listen to, just go online and listen to Someone's Been Sending Me Flowers. This album's not online, or as far as I know, it's not online, but there's a version that she recorded in Melbourne, which the ABC put out a decade later, which I think you'll enjoy.
Nice. Yep, that was certainly a sideways move, no doubt about it.
What's your sideways move now?
Well, I don't have one because for those of you who know me will know that I have a soft spot for power pop, and I was looking over the years for any 80s power pop and came across this album, the third studio album from a band called the Sunny Boys, or just Get Some Fun is the name of the album, and it was released in April of 1984. I love it. It's got that guitar-oriented attack right through it, and it's a great album. Released on Mushroom Records, of course, and got to number 36 on our Australian charts. At the time, I didn't really know anything about them because, as you know, I gave music a miss for a while, but came back to it while I was doing some research on power pop, and this Australian band has come up with the goods, and it's my number 4 for 1984, number 4 album, Get Some Fun by Sunny Boys.
And I bet you loved the ice block treat when you were a kid.
I love
yes.
Sunny Boy. But there were different flavors, don't forget.
Raz
was the red one.
Glug.
Glug was the green one.
And
no, Glug was Coke.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Raz was the red one. Glug was Coke.
And Sunny Boys was
the yellow pineapple one. And of course, Sunny Boys was orange. Yeah. Oh, I couldn't get enough of that stuff, mate. That was beautiful.
Did you ever open the wrapper up and find that you got a freebie?
Of course.
Yes, regularly.
Regularly.
As far as I remember, it happened to me once. But anyway, I'm not complaining.
The packs are gone.
I'm not traumatized. I'm not traumatized by not getting free Sunny Boys.
Yeah, they phase them out now, and you just get the Zupa Dupas and those, long skinny things. But you can't beat the Tetra Pak.
Yeah.
All right, let's get on to number 3. Martin.
Okay, my number 3 album is from a gentleman who is probably the vanguard of the second generation virtuoso, dexterous, very fast electric guitar players. After when Van Halen arrived in the late 70s, there was something new in the world of rock music and virtuosity and attention to detail and precision. And Steve Vai, probably Yngwie Malmsteen and others, I tend to think of as the second generation. And Steve Vai, I wasn't familiar with his work with Frank Zappa. I was familiar with his work to come in years to come with David Lee Roth and with Whitesnake and as a solo artist. But he put out a record that he paid for himself called Flexible. And some songs had some vocalists on some of them, but extraordinary instrumentals. And Call It Sleep, Salamanders in the Sun, and particularly the Attitude song, where he's playing bass and harmony guitars at impossible speeds and just absolutely brain snapping. And one of the things that he used to do was he would bend the string, so he'd pick a note and he would bend it right up. So he'd bend it up to 3 semitones, but his bends were so precise and in tune, and his intonation was impeccable. And I was in a band myself at the time. I could never play that style or that speed. But if ever I had to do a guitar solo, just from listening to lots of Steve Vai, I suddenly found that I was aware that I had previously not really been bending my notes in tune very much because I was just used to hearing the pitch from this guy. So thank you, Steve, for helping my intonation and my ability to hear the pitches better.
Wow, fantastic. Where's your number 3?
Number 3 takes us right up to the 20th century, literally. Cold Chisel. And the 5th and final album for Mark I of Cold Chisel. It featured things like Saturday Night, No Sense, Flame Trees, Hold Tight. They were the singles. And interestingly enough, on all the Cold Chisel albums, they've all got the album version of Saturday Night, not the single version, which is, at least in the front, significantly different. I kind of like the single version better, but you'd expect that from me being a jock. The album's got plenty of pace and power, and I regard it as Cold Chisel's best early album. It's
Wow.
Now, I know the band regarded as a nightmare, simply because it was recorded in so many different places and they had technical issues just trying to get all the different studios to sync up. Interestingly, Jimmy Barnes submitted a track called No Second Prize to be included on the record, and it got bumped. And that got bumped for his solo album, which came out a little while later. But there it is. So what's that, number 3? 20th Century from Cold Chisel.
Good call.
Yeah.
Good call. I couldn't help but feeling when Jimmy Barnes put his first solo band together that Mal Eastick was a deliberate hire to fill the Ian Moss role. And this is probably why Mal didn't last terribly long, because it was like, yeah, I have to do whatever row I need to hoe. It needs to be something of myself and not a carbon copy of what Cold Chisel had done.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing there.
I wasn't very impressed with the first album of his because I thought the sound was really, really muddy. And they took steps to refix that with the remastering later, but it's very dull. That's the first album of Barnes.
Cool. Well, boys, my number 3 is a debut album, and I referred to this band last time we met when we were doing the 1984 singles, and I'm referring now to the Hoodoo Gurus. They released their debut in March of 1984, and it's called Stone Age Romeos. I like this album. I like it a lot. It sort of like garage rock meets, I don't know, punk meets power pop. I don't know. It's just got all the ingredients of what they were going to sound like as they progressed, but a lot rawer. And this particular album contains that single, I Want You Back, but has so much to offer. And what sets this album apart from, say, the Sunny Boys is that there's much more adventure vocally when you get a lot of backing vocals, etc., that help to broaden the soundscape. Excellent debut from the Hoodoo Gurus at my number 3, Stone Age Romeos.
Good.
Yeah.
Love Dave Faulkner.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. He's a great vocalist and really knows how to deliver a lyric, that guy. Fantastic.
And a really funny man. Really funny man. He's hilarious.
All right.
If memory serves me right, they named themselves after a fictional group that was featured in an episode of Get Smart TV show. Les Hoodoo Gurus, with Larry Storch from F Troop, the funny looking one, the funny looking guy. He was, wearing his paisley caftan and, his headband. And
who remembers F Troop? Love that.
Yeah, good show.
who remembers Get Smart? That's anyway.
Have you got your shoe phone there?
Yeah, sorry about that, Chief. I asked you not to tell me that. I told you not to ask me that.
All right, so we're up to number 2, Martin.
Yeah, it's Scottish trio called the Blue Nile, and their album A Walk Across the Rooftops. And so it seems to me that these guys bought themselves a drum machine and some keyboards and some. It's very right. You were referring earlier, Leo, to the fact that you like very sparse and very spare production. This is about as sparse and as spare as it gets. The singer isn't particularly trained, not the most pretty voice you're ever going to hear, but there's just something intriguing about the understatedness and the quality of this guy's voice. Not much more I can say about it, but worth an explore if you're into something a bit more low key. The Blue Nile, Walk Across the Rooftops. My number 2.
What about you, Wes? What's your number 2?
Well, my number 2 is pretty close to my number 1. And to be honest with you, I've been just sitting here juggling which one it's going to be. So this is my number 2 then. And it's The Swing by NXS. It's 4th studio record from the group. Featured songs like Original Sin, I Send a Message, Burn for You, Dancing on the Jetty. Nick Launay and Nile Rodgers did the production. And if you're familiar with the earlier material from the band, this has got far more dance rhythms about it. The pair, in other words, the production guys, gave them certainly a stronger, harder edge to what they are doing. And part of the reason, I guess, is they were readying the band for the international market. Bill Motzing did the string arrangements, had a lot of time for his work, and Jenny Morris and Sean Kelly of the Models were doing some of the backup vocals. So it was a stellar lineup.
Good choice.
Yeah. Okay, well, my number 2 is by a band that another band, the band I mentioned last time we met, also with Ghost Ships as my number 3 for the singles, and that's the Saints. They released an album called A Little Madness to Be Free. This is a really good album. This is Chris Bailey at his best. It's probably, you could probably call it a Chris Bailey project, I reckon, because even though he brought original members back in, Kim Bradshaw and Ivor Hay on drums, Bradshaw on bass, it's mainly Bailey, and he does a lot of arranging on this because there's a lot of great brass and a lot of fantastic strings on this album. and it really works. It's one of those that grows on you and continues to do so for me. But yet again, another album that I didn't pursue in '84, but over the years have gone back to the '80s Saints and really appreciated what they've done. And this album is no exception.
Hmm.
Okay, let's go with our honourable mentions now before we get to our number one. Martin, any honourables?
A couple of honourables. So I mentioned The Killing Moon is my favourite single of '84 from Echo and the Bunnymen, and their album Ocean Rain that came from has some killer songs on it. Not a perfect album by any stretch, but some remarkable tunes on there. Another one is by a group called Aztec Camera, who produced by Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits. Their album Knife. The title track of that song is long and meandering, like 9.5 or 10 minutes or something. Feels like 2 minutes, but it also feels like 4 hours, if you know what I mean. It's one of those, it's where you just get lost in the moment and then you kind of blink and you're like, where am I? What time is it? What's going on? Beautiful stuff. That's my honourable mentions.
Yep, cool. Wes?
Now, I want to, as I said in the beginning, any of these could easily have been in my top 5. The Angels, 2-minute warning.
Yeah.
I had, Between the Eyes and Look the Other Way on it, both singles. Philip Bailey, Chinese Walls, with Walking on the Chinese Walls as a single, and the amazing duet that he did with Phil Collins called Easy Lover.
Yeah.
Interestingly, here in Australia, the record company put that out as a single. Then they found they didn't have the rights to put it out as a single. And so they withdrew it. So I don't think it charted highly, if at all. But radio still kept on playing it because they had the radio version. David Allan Coe, he has an album called Just Divorced. And one of my favourite songs from working in a country music radio station was Mona Lisa Lost Her Smile. And that was being played pretty heavily as a single in '83, but it came out on the Just Divorced album. David Allan Coe is one of the masters, I guess, of being able to write very alluring sort of songs. And he's written songs about the ride and a meeting up with Hank Williams. Just see if you can find that. It's called The Ride. Dragon also loved The Body and the Beat. Now, a bit of a contentious one here from LRB, and it was called LRB at that time, and the album was Playing to Win. That's an album which at the time was pretty well dissed. However, that song and also several tracks from the album have really stood the test of time now. And the final one is Donna Summer album called Cats Without Claws. Cool. They're mine also runs.
Nice. Well, I've only got one honourable mention. This discovery, and it's definitely a discovery, came about when I heard a track. When you're playing when you're streaming music and all of a sudden the streaming service provides you with some suggestions and you're playing them, one of the songs of this band, a Scottish band, came out and I said, oh, this is pretty good. Very appealing vocals, nice jangly guitar, very good. And of course, I discovered that the tune was from an album called Sisters by a band called the Bluebells. I don't know if you've heard of the Bluebells.
No, that's really sideways here, mate.
Yeah. Well, it deserves an honourable mention because every track is very appealing to me. I couldn't I thought, I'm just going to play 15 seconds of each track, and if they're any good, fine. If not, nothing lost, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I just listened to the whole album in its entirety, and I loved it. And I had to play it again. It's a very, very good album, and I suggest that if anyone wants to explore a nice jangly guitar-based pop band, try the Bluebells with their first full-length album called Sisters, which was released in 1984. Beautiful. All right, well, time for our number ones, boys. Let's go straight to Martin. You're number one, mate.
Okay, this was from my favourite movie at the time, which has not stood the test of time, which is just as well because a remake was put out a couple of years ago, talking about the soundtrack from Dune, famously directed by David Lynch, and the soundtrack mainly by the members of Toto, and one track in particular by Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois, and just gorgeous atmospheric music. And the Toto track "Take My Hand" in particular, which was the end title, just beautiful, absolutely beautiful melody, and the prophecy theme by Eno and Lanois, so evocative and atmospheric, and that sense of the desolate. Of course, the Denis Villeneuve movie Dune, which was out a couple of years ago, and Dune Part 2, which has just been out this year and raking in the bucks. In the late 70s, there was a director called Alejandro Jodorowsky, famous for art house movies like El Topo and The Holy Mountain. And he had the rights to make it, and he wanted to make a 10 or 14-hour version of the Frank Herbert books into a Dune movie. He had signed Pink Floyd to do the soundtrack. So, you know, we might have had a Dune soundtrack from Pink Floyd if history had worked out differently. But Toto did pretty good, and that's my number one album from 1984.
Nice. Okay, you're number one, Wes.
You kind of like alluded to this a little bit earlier, that I'm talking about the Midnight Oil album, Red Sails in the Sunset. And as I was saying, that it and also the NXS album are pretty well close, but there's the reason why I'm giving this the edge, so to speak, is because of a personal thing that happened. And I'll tell you about that. This is the 5th studio album for Midnight Oil, and I think it's one of their most mature and ambitious projects, probably just ahead of Diesel and Dust, at least for me. There are a few, I'm going to call them masterpieces on the album. When the Generals Talk, Best of Both Worlds, Kosciuszko, and Jimmy Sharman's Boxes. Now, for you prog rockers, you might
Whoever
like,
that might be.
yeah, you might like Harrisburg and Bells and Shipyards. And what was the something special? I went to see Midnight Oil play in concert in Taree at the RSL Club. I had the balls to go and ask to do an interview with him, knowing full well that he doesn't do any interviews. Well, the message came back, meet Peter tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, and he'll give you an interview, and you've got an hour.
An hour.
You've got an hour.
An hour.
I got an hour with Peter Garrett.
Wow.
And the function of the interview was to talk about Red Sails in the Sunset. I think the band was quite surprised because they were doing songs from the album. They were surprised that I even knew some of the songs from it. And I don't know how I convinced them of that because it wasn't around at all. But anyway, I was able to refer to them, songs from the album, and we spoke also about a number of their earlier hits like Power and the Passion. Well, this is both good and bad. The good part is I got to meet Garrett and he gave me the time of day. CBS, who is the record company, didn't believe me that I got the interview. And I said, that's all right. We'll send you a copy of it when it goes to air, but I need a copy of the album. Would you send me a copy of the album? Yeah, well, they certainly did, because at that time there was to be no singles. The singles did come later. But the bad is, I missed the scoop of the year for Peter Garrett. Now, I got the interview to talk about Red Sails in the Sunset. So I got the interview, and I don't think anything apart from major press got an interview about the album. So I certainly was the only radio station who got it. And so I played it a couple of times on as historical features. But the bad news was I got back to the studio and got a phone call from AAP or Reuters or one of those. I said, do you know where Garrett is? I said, yeah, I do. He's just left the hotel and he's on his way up to the mid-north coast, or further up the mid-north coast, Port Macquarie. I said, why? He said, they've just announced, right, that he's standing for the nuclear disarmament party. I missed the scoop. That was the scoop.
And hence now every interview concludes with, and where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I don't even go there.
Oh, man.
But I got the interview regarding Red Sails, and I missed the major story of the day. So, but then again, how was I to know anyway? And he wasn't volunteering it. And my suspicion is that it wasn't going to be announced until
The tour was over.
So that's, but I still went, oh man, you could have volunteered that, Peter. You could have. So, but that's still my number one. And I listened to it a lot then, and I still listen to it today.
Yeah, good. Beautiful. I suspected we were going to hear more of that. That's a good choice, mate. Look, my number one's out there, and I think I need to introduce my sister into the conversation now, because she has been in the music business since she left school. Obviously, she started in a record store and progressed through to the couple of major record companies over the years. But about 5 years ago, pre-COVID, she came. My sister and my mum came to live with us, and they're still with us now. And she brought her records with her. So I had a look at her 80s stuff a while back, and one album hit me in the face, and I thought, I haven't heard this, and this looks interesting. It's the debut album, another debut album here in my top 5, by a band called the Bangles. My goodness.
I am surprised.
Yeah, this album has hit me between the eyes. It is a great pop rock, guitar pop rock album that I love from start to finish. And I heard it and I heard it and I heard it and continue to listen to it. This is a brilliant debut. Now for my rant. Now, was it you, Wes, that was talking about mastering and stuff like that?
Yeah.
The records, the flimsy records of the 80s. Well, I'm going to throw this in as one of them. Number one, it was an Australian pressing, which usually they're not as good as the original pressings from the original countries. That's number one. Number two, flimsy. Really, it's not a great pressing and desperately needs to be remastered. Great harmonies. Oh, they abound on this album. Backing vocals, harmonies. We've got 3 different singers doing the lead vocals. I just love it. My number one, All Over the Place, is the name, and it's by a band called the Bangles. There you go.
Any singles on it? Any singles?
Yes. And this, another reason why I'm spewing is because one of the singles, I love it, and should have made my top 5, but Bette Midler made it instead. This is called Hero Takes a Fall. I don't know if you guys know that one.
Nope.
Going Down to Liverpool, which is another great song, both released in 1984. Really strange. I'd like to dig deeper into why this isn't available on streaming at the very least. And as I said before, that vinyl needs to be remastered by Bernie Grundman or Kevin Gray or one of those big, heavy-hitting, great sound engineer, mastering engineers. And I think we're going to get a product that's magnificent.
I think if you look at even their greatest hits collections, there hasn't been a really good remaster of the songs from that for some time. And I have got 2 best of CDs of theirs, several years apart, probably a decade apart, and they're exactly the same masters.
Right, okay.
So I think it's a matter that there really hasn't been what appears to be sufficient money going into remastering their material. And maybe we have to look at, say, Cherry Red or one of those companies in the UK to go and remaster the entire collection of theirs. And, you know, they've basically got 5 albums of material, and some of those are amazing stuff, and really love their music.
Yeah, great.
Are Cherry Red the current day Rhino, Wes?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Oh, there you go, boys. That's 1984 done and dusted. Wow.
Wow.
Through that. It was tough going, but we got there, and I'm looking forward to next time we catch up, because we're going to go deeper into the decades, going into 94, 30 years ago.
Let me throw it out to you. You know, heck, you've stayed on here for about an hour. You poor soul. You poor soul. Well, for that, the least we can do is give your top 5. So if you've lasted this long,
tell us.
Give us your top 5 of singles from 1994 or top 5 albums from that year, and just shoot us the note. If there you go. I'm sure there's plenty of space to write at the bottom of this YouTube clip.
Oh, absolutely. We've got comments, a comment section. So if you want to use it, by all means do so. We're happy to hear any comments that people would like to put forward, even your 80s albums. If you've got any that we didn't mention that you think are worthy of mentioning, please, by all means, do so. We're happy to have a read and comment on your comment or whatever.
If you'd prefer to send something via email, you can shoot it to our radio email address, which is request@45rpmradio.com.
Beautiful. Nice. I like it. All right. So we'll reconvene shortly and get into our 1994 singles, followed by our 1994 albums. Looking forward to it, guys.
All CD singles by that stage. Vinyl's virtually gone by then.
No more 45 RPM there.
Strange days indeed.
Yeah, all gone.
All right. Looking
All
forward.
righty, guys.
Later.
Cheers.